Hi, I'm Jennifer from Shabby Fabrics. Welcome to our No-Sew Quilted Christmas series. We have 3 projects in mind for you. We have a wreath, a pine cone ornament, and then a cute little wreath ornament as well. And that's our little puppy Honey in there. You could put your kid's picture in there or nothing, either way. It's just as adorable. Let me show you how fun it is. We're using the Hoffman Jingle Pops. Now, if you haven't seen this before, every year Hoffman has I think they have the most iconic Christmas collections. They're very metallic, beautiful poinsettias, berries, birds, just beautiful. And year over year, they have Jingle Pops. And this is the 2016 collection. And all 3 projects were made with 1 Jingle Pops. And you have enough left over to make maybe multiple pine cone ornaments or the smaller wreath ornament as well. So be sure to pick up the Jingle Pops. There's 42.5-inch squares. Now the first thing that we did is we just cut those into 2.5-inch squares. So these are 2.5-inch strips, and you just get your little Omni-Grip 6.5-inch ruler, which I absolutely love. I'll get just a little bit of the strips here, and just put that on your cutting mat and cut some 2.5-inch squares. Now to do the let me come over there just a little bit. Measure twice, cut once, right? I did that and I won, so that's a good thing. To make the wreath, which is the only thing we'll be covering in this video. Subsequently, if you haven't subscribed to YouTube, our channel, just subscribe, and that way you always know when we have new videos coming out, and we have them coming out every week. So to make the wreath, you'll need 153 squares if you'll be using this diameter of wreath. Now, on our homepage at the very bottom, there's a link that says free downloads. You'll be looking for the No-Sew Quilted Christmas wreath, and it'll give you a list of the supplies. So I won't go over sizes of things like that, sizes of ribbon. All of that will be listed for you. So you can just click that, download it, and it'll let you know what you need to buy. 153 of these 2.5-inch squares is what we used to make this. And we used a box of satin pins. Now a box of satin pins is 400, and we used most of them in this project. So if you'll be doing these other 2 as well, be sure to pick up 2 boxes of the satin pins. But let me show you how. Once you get your squares cut out, it's really fun. And this is such a great one to do with your kids. I love projects that I can do with my family and friends. They're not complicated. It doesn't take a sewing machine. So simple. So you'll just take this to your pressing mat, and I'm going to give a nice press. I want a nice crisp edge. So be sure your iron is on its hottest setting. Now you've got your raw edge and your folded edge. On the folded edge, you will just bring both sides inward and make a little arrow, a little point here, and I will press again. And you'll do that. I recommend just doing that for all 153 all at the same time. Now the Jingle Pop set has a beautiful array of colors, from blacks to greens to reds to gold to even cream. So you can just decide, we obviously biased it so black, but then we did some green, red, and cream. So it kind of it got lighter as you got toward the center. So think about the arrangement you want, or you could go completely random, although I think the organized color looks better. So that's just something to think about. Get everything pressed ahead of time. And now you'll bring out your wreath and your pins. You'll need to wrap your form. So we chose a beautiful black, and we chose a couple strips. It'll take 2 or 3. And you just want to wrap it. Here, let me show you what I mean. We just got in there and it just came in kind of diagonally. The first thing I recommend you do is go ahead and trim off the selvage, just because you don't want that white to show. And we'll go ahead and start at an angle and put in a pin or 2 just to secure it. And you're just going to cover it up. That's your only purpose. It's one of those things where you kind of make it work, so to speak. And I didn't even really pin as I went. I'm wrapping it very tight, and it just wants to hold in place. and just keep wrapping it around all the way. Let me just finish that up. I will go ahead and finish wrapping this up, and when we come back, this will be all wrapped, and we'll go to the first stage of laying out the first layer of our wreath. Now that the wreath is completely wrapped, and by the way, I took 3 strips to do that, so you have plenty of strips in there. There's 40, so don't worry about using an extra strip. On our wreath, we built the color from the darkest to the lightest, black, green, red, kind of a gold cream toward the center. So I would, of course, be using a black, and that's what's on our sample, both here and back behind me. But because you're not going to be able to see that, I'm going to go ahead and put a cream down so there's some contrast so you can see what I'm doing. Now there's the opening. Let's flip it upside down. There's the midpoint of the wreath. I'm going to start slightly above the midpoint, slightly higher on that, and you'll be adding 9 rows of 17 squares for a total of 153 squares. Now I'm just going to pin each point of that. And again, if you can kind of visualize this line drawn just slightly above the midpoint of the wreath, that's what we'll be pinning our squares to. So I'm going to do the next one. Again, trying to make that nice and horizontal, tip to tip, with 2 pins each, one on each end, and one more. And then I will show you what to do next. Of course, you're going to just keep pinning tip to tip all the way around that distance. So I'm going to show you what that looks like. Let me move these layers out of the way. You just keep going tip to tip all the way around. Again, it's 17. There's always 17 of the folded squares on each of the 9 layers. So you visualize that going all the way around, and then I would come in with, in this case, we used, looks like we came back in and used a black again. I'm just going to show you a different color, just again so that you can see the contrast. Now this creates a V here. For the next row up, I'm going to go up about 1/4 of an inch, maybe slightly less than that. And I'm just aiming for the gap. That's what I'm looking for right here. I'll go ahead and pin again. So let's see, how's that look? So I'm just getting in that gap right there. And again, you'll go all the way around the distance of your wreath. As you come up and over the top, let me just pin that in before I even mention that. There we go. We're just kind of shooting the gap. And then the next layer is going to kind of cover up this gap. Let me show you how that's looking here. So that's going to cover that gap, and the next flap's going to cover that gap. So the next layer in succession is always covering up the pins and the gap from the layer behind. Now see how the wreath builds all the way around until you come to the very last row in the center. Now notice how as I got toward the middle, as I got closer, the distance here is longer than the distance in the middle. So as I got toward closer and closer to the middle, they're not tip to tip, they overlap slightly. See this right here? See how there's the overlap? So it's logical. It's not as further of a distance, so they overlap slightly to cover that. Now, here is my final piece for the middle. We're going to finish this up. And see how it's the overlap now, because it has to. We'll put that in. Now there's another type of pin that we use that you want to pick up. They're the pearl head pins. They're so beautiful. I use them actually for quilting as well, so they have lots of uses. But notice how as you get toward the center row, the fabric wants to flip up. Well, if you use the beautiful pearl head pins, you can hold that point down and it looks like Christmas lights on a tree. So that's a really fun thing. Now, The pearl head pins come in a variety of colors, including pastels, pinks, purples. You can just avoid using those colors and use just the jewel tones in the red, green, and gold. And as you can see, I would finish this all the way around, and it holds that down. So, plus with that flap coming up, you can kind of see the raw edge in the pin. This way, it hides all of that, and it just kind of tucks everything in. Once that's done, now we want to cover up this raw edge. That's where you get to go shop for some beautiful gold ribbon. You could even use fabric in there. We chose a beautiful gold metallic ribbon. Varying widths. We chose the wider one because it just kind of hid more. So let me get that out. We cut that ahead of time. There's glitter on the one side. Well, I'm going for glitter. I'm a glitter girl, so I'm going to go for that. And we simply place that there and just started pinning. Oh, you know, we're not going to use that pin. We're going to use our straight pins here. Pin that in. And you just work your way around. Now, you could obviously use more of the pearl head pins. I grabbed that initially. If you want it to show, great. If you don't want it to show, go ahead and use the satin pins because they tend to be a little almost invisible. And you're just going to pin that through. You could use hot glue. Just know when I've used hot glue with styrofoam, it can tend to melt the styrofoam a little bit. Just wanted to bring that to your attention if that's one of the things you might be thinking about doing instead of pinning. I know there are some glues that have a lower melting point, and maybe that's a solution if you would prefer that over pinning. So you'll just pin this all the way around, or glue as you prefer. Pinning seemed to work really well for us. So you'll pin that all the way around, and then just notice how we used more of the ribbon. We just kind of folded that edge under, just kind of create a little something here. So that's a raw edge. And then let's say that, of course, let me just quickly pin something in place so I can show you. Of course, I'd be pinning very carefully, very smoothly all the way around. Okay, so just gather up those ends. Like I said, like that. And then you can just pin this to the top. Again, use more of those satin pins, or you could use the pearl head pins because they are longer. In fact, I recommend that. And as you know, you have other colors left over too, and no one's going to see that back there. And let me just pin that in, and our wreath is going to be ready to display. There we go. Of course, I pinned that in a little bit better, and now your wreath is ready to display or give as a gift. I hope you enjoyed learning how to make the no-sew quilted Christmas wreath from Shabby Fabrics.